Hi everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the second day of the Meiyume Showcase Insight session. I'm joined here with Steve Dodd, who's SVP of Retail Solutions. Myself, Robert Brockman, I work in Retail Solutions as well as Head of Technology for retail. Today we're going to be talking about brick and mortar retail. Why is it still relevant after there's been a lot of changes in the last 2 years, 2.5 years. Some people may be wondering, with the shift, a lot of the accelerated shift to e-commerce, how does brick and mortar retail stay relevant? So with that, we will get into it.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I think, first of all, it's great to be out meeting people face to face again. Of course, we're here doing the Meiyume event, as we're also doing Cosmoprof. So Cosmoprof, it's been a few years since we've done Cosmoprof. Great to have it back in Asia. Normally it's in our hometown of Hong Kong, but you can't.
Singapore is just as good.
Singapore's just as good, yeah. So, and it's great for retail. Obviously, Singapore, there's a lot going on with retail in Singapore and Asia as a whole. And Rob, as you say, it's been an interesting few years for retail, right? I think a lot has happened, and during the course of that time, obviously, a lot of people moved on to online shopping. For the convenience, but when you're locked down at home and you can't go out, you don't really have the options. No choice whatsoever. But I think it's interesting now to see how retail is kind of coming out of that and really wanting to create a very different experience to before COVID, because I think people still do that shopping online, but they want to find out about the product and connect with the brand and connect with the products physically, but maybe don't necessarily want to have to then queue up, cash register, get a bag and walk around the town all day with it. So getting it delivered at home makes a lot of sense, right? I'm having some fun with the slides. Okay. But I think we definitely see some particular trends with retail in this last kind of 18 months. I think we're seeing definitely that whereas retailers used to be a bit of a one box thing, that you would go for one particular thing, that they're definitely trying to add complementary services onto those stores to create a little bit more of a different experience for consumers. We see lots of brands now putting coffee shops in their stores. So again, a bit of a mix. I don't want to walk around the store. I'll sit over there, have a coffee.
Yep.
And interesting, even the online businesses now starting stores in the physical world, right? So you've got, we all know Amazon, started to do this before COVID, but has accelerated that quite a bit, particularly with the Amazon Go experience. And I think we see some changes with the department store businesses as well. So if you think, historically, department store, ground floor, first floor, always beauty. Biggest revenue drivers for any department store is always the ground floor beauty. Starting to see that getting disrupted quite a bit. I think about Daimaru store in Tokyo Station, where they actually put the beauty hall in the basement.
Ginza 6.
And Ginza 6, in Ginza as well. Another one, they put all the beauty brands in the basement. First floor was more of a mix of luxury with some some eateries and some cafes and stuff as well. And I always think back to way before COVID, this trend of kind of disrupting the retail space, particularly for department stores, was already shifting. I think Shinsegai in Seoul, which is if I remember rightly, an 11-story department store, huge building in Seoul, very, very popular. When they did a refurbishment, they actually got away from the concept of ground floor is beauty, first floor is women's luxury, second floor women's casual, and so on and so on, like every floor is now completely mixed up, right?
Yeah.
So you can go to the first floor that used to be the women's luxury, and yes, there's some women's luxury, but there's also a cafe and a flower shop, and there's a gadget corner. Yeah, so the people like us who are not interested in looking at things have somewhere to go, right? And it creates a great experience. And the other thing also about not just how they mix the product offerings in the locations, but the disruption of the layout as well, because historically department stores were escalators in the middle, everything runs at right angles, right? But in Shinsegae that they run diagonals and curved walkways made it feel very, very, very different experience. And they saw that in their numbers ultimately, right?
I think another example is K11 Museum in Hong Kong, which is, they sort of market it as like an art, I don't know, venue or something. They don't sort of say this is a shopping mall. They kind of take a different angle to it.
Yeah, and you obviously it is a shopping center.
Yeah.
But again, it's not consistent about where the products are within it. Everything's very distributed. And as you say, they have some absolutely amazing, artwork that's continually rotating in. Everybody always talks about, oh, have you seen the artwork in K11? They don't say, oh, have you been to that restaurant in K11, right? It's almost like the artwork and that experience around the artwork is the core that holds that concept together, and everything else is supplementary to that, right? I think, again, that kind of online to offline, getting out of the online business and getting into physical retail is definitely a trend we see, right? I'm just thinking here, so we're looking at Sociola. So Sociola started as an online business, right?
I believe so, yes.
An Indonesian-based online business, but got to a point where they realized that having a brick and mortar presence was important and useful to complement their online channel. But again, very much used as an experience, so they're constantly swapping products out. You don't know what's going to be in there. You can go, you can test, you can try it out, and then if you want it, you order it and get it delivered home.
Yeah, I think we can see on the slide there's a lot of different multi-brand beauty retailers now. I think Sephora obviously started that trend. Before Sephora, there was nothing. You had to go to the department stores. But even though there are Sephoras in all of the countries that are represented in these, where these different retailers are, there are still people that believe that they can compete in this space. And there are new retailers like Mecca in Australia or even Boy in Thailand that think that they can compete with Sephora, and it shows that people still believe in the offline channels.
And interestingly, the kind of the path that they come into that physical retail. So we obviously look at Sephora really starting as a different retail experience, right? But if you look at Mecca, ultimately this is it was influencers who started a beauty brand, who then started to get into retail.
Yeah.
I think Even Boy is the same, right? Even Boy, they're both two high-profile influencers in Thailand. Were online, created their own brand, started their own products, and then ultimately created this retail concept where their fans and their customers could come in and have a very different experience. Right. So we definitely see that kind of influencers who get into beauty and starting up beauty businesses, then at some point getting into that physical retail world, right? Yeah. And I think those experience matters. I think if you think about it, shopping online is it's like it used to be shopping in a store, right? It's very it's not exciting, right?
It's very transactional.
It's super transactional. You flip through the catalog, I like it, put it in the car, check out, and then I'm just waiting for it to turn up. We all know there are brands who do that online experience really well and make it feel a little bit more interactive and experiential, but the fundamental process is pretty much like you used to do in a store. You go to the store, you walk around, you try on a few things, you like it, you go to the counter, you cash out. Transaction. And I think now that transactional activity has kind of become what the majority of the online is, I think people are looking now for, well, then I want an experience rather than a transaction. And we certainly see, a lot of demand from consumers, particularly with the clients that we work with, to create that, more of an experience, less about actually selling and retailing in that space, right?
Yeah, and you can see there are a bunch of retailers in the U.S. that have met their demise because they don't offer experience. So I don't know if anyone listening is aware of Sears or J.C. Penney's. These are huge retailer department stores in the United States. They dominated the U.S. market, and they've just become obsolete in retailing in the U.S. because they don't offer any compelling experiences whatsoever. It's just aisles and aisles of product, and it's boring, and they're not attracted to that type of channel anymore.
And then you have the flip side of that, right? It's like, look at Macy's, survived through COVID, actually stronger coming out of COVID, but what did they really do to change? They changed their store layouts, right? They created a lot more experience, touch zones within the stores. They have a very strong online channel as well, but again, creating that, you go to Macy's, you can get everything, right? But you could also have an experience, and you don't actually need to carry it home, that you can basically get it online. Good discounts as well, right? It was good with Macy's. Yeah. But you're right, there's a lot of, when you look at a lot of fashion brands and even, beauty outlets that have, not survived through the process because they haven't evolved and haven't created experience. We talk about Sephora. In the US, Ulta Beauty is significantly bigger than Sephora. Why? I think their concept was not to go into the cities, but to go into the suburbs, to the big box retail locations, big box retail parks, and create a really good experience. They have a whole row of products in the stores that is just indie brands, new indie brands, very, very short. And they actually encourage indie brands to kind of stock up on the shelves. Once they're sold out, that's it, they're gone. As well as having all the established brands. Not so many established brands, though. They tend to be very, very much more the kind of the indies and the niche brands. I think last time I was in New York, it was like Ozzy Osbourne launched a color cosmetics range. You could only get it in Ulta.
Right.
It wasn't available anywhere else. And those kind of things pull in clients, right? And I think just some comments here from a couple of big, obviously, retailers in the beauty space. So Boots. Going back to your comment about Sephora. Well, actually, Boots were doing what Sephora was doing. Boots is a very old company. Yeah. So, and obviously, any of you been to the UK would have gone into a Boots to see the beauty area that they have there. But even Boots recognizes that, they can't continue that model, right? That it doesn't work anymore. So they are also now getting rid of the big counters that they used to have, going down into more kind of specific product categories, where there are much more touch points and interaction. Aesop's a really good example. Their actually product range is quite narrow. It's not like they have thousands and thousands and thousands of SKUs. They have a very niche focus for the brand, but their retail experiences are fantastic. The kind of, you go in and there's a bar in the middle where you can go and try them, and the staff take you through it. It's a great experience, and they take that to another step. I think we were talking yesterday. I didn't know, and I guess afterwards I thought about that makes sense. But every single Aesop store is different. The designs are different. Every single one of them. There's not two Aesop stores alike. So that creates an experience in itself. That it's not, you're not going to the same place to get the same thing. Every one you go to is a little bit different. And you said something that they use materials or something.
Yeah, they draw influence from the local market and culture, and they know that they don't want to be cookie cutter and just have you walk by, there's another Aesop store. They want you to walk by and say, ooh, that's another Aesop store. Let's see what this one looks like. Yeah. So it's a means to draw people in, wherever they are.
I kind of tying that to like the Starbucks mug, right, where they had a different mug in every city.
Yeah, correct.
So then people started going into Starbucks to get the mugs.
Right.
It's like you say, it's the same thing. Oh, I'm in Singapore. it'd be great to go and see a couple of Aesop stores and see how they build that experience here. But yeah, it's very, it's a great approach. It creates a very good experience for consumers. Okay. So I think, when we talk about experiential retail, I think we also talk about, again, still convenience, right? Convenience is an important piece. And I think, we look at, particularly I think over the last couple of years, that COVID has kind of driven a particular resurgence within the beauty industry of things like sampling, sampling and testing, refilling as well. Obviously the refilling is a big pitch on sustainability, etc. So instead of buying it and then throwing it away, I take the bottle back to the store and get it refilled again. But again, that convenience factor.
Yeah, right? It makes it a convenient way to refill, because if you have to, put it in a FedEx box and get it shipped out, it's kind of it's an extra painful step. But if you just bring it to the store, it's a lot faster.
Yeah, and certainly I think even the testing, the non-touch testing that we had a lot of requests from clients, very early on in COVID that that didn't want to have a touch interaction with the products in the stores and wanted to kind of shift very quickly to that. And I think we pretty quickly got out some great solutions with some of our clients. Yeah, that then they've taken that into their normal model now, right? That's right. And it's great. We go around, the airports and look at the travel retail and the stores that we see, all these things that we've done. It's great to see them in operation as well, and our brands embracing that, taking that on, and creating an experience through that interaction. So not just touchless testing, but actually through that experience, educating the consumer about the product, capturing data, capturing information. Right? Personalization. So big topic area, obviously. I think there's a couple of different pieces onto personalization within beauty, right? So you have we see skincare brands particularly really using technology and the experience around personalization to ensure that consumers get aligned to the right product, right? It's not about creating a unique experience for the consumer per se. It's more around, look, we have 8 or 9 different skincare products. Which one is the right one for you, right? So using that experience, the interaction, the learning, but also technology to kind of identify, which consumers, fit with which products. Yeah, we see that a lot with the skincare brands for sure. I think on the color cosmetics, I think interaction around the physical product and the packaging. So this is one that Guerlain do really, really well with their Rouge G lipstick. So, instead of selling it as a set, you actually can choose the case, you choose your color, and, it's not real personalization, but it feels personal because you're making something that's unique to yourself, right?
Yeah, and obviously you can do that customization online, but with the Guerlain example, with the different case options, you have different textures, you have different tactile feelings that you're not going to get that same experience online. So
yeah, and even though we know obviously with there's a lot of technology around try-on makeups and lipsticks, but you're absolutely right. That tactile feel and look is very different. And again, Guerlain do a really good job because they don't stay still with those packaging, right? That they're constantly thinking about the next version, and we kind of always look back at the Apple model, with the Apple, and then selling the cases. You sell more cases than the iPhone. Again, the same concept. Well, I might have one lipstick, but I have 3 or 4 different cases, depending if I'm going, brunch with my friends or going to the theater in the evening. And then as they bring out lots of new models, it becomes almost like a collectible trace, right? Yeah. And then Penhaligon's, right? So they do quite a bit of work around
The fragrance finder.
The fragrance finder, yeah. It's a great experience. Yeah. You say you can't get everything into a physical location, right? So that using technology, creating an experience allows you to maybe represent 5,000-6,000 products in quite a small footprint.
Yes.
So we want to talk a little bit about elevation as well, right? And I think the very scientific looking blue one on the end here, you actually went to, right?
Yeah, this is the sort of like a wellness experience that Shiseido offers in their Ginza flagship in Tokyo. So their store is actually multi-levels. This particular experience is in the basement, and the experience actually is not connected to any of the beauty products per se. It's just about some like a meditative kind of relaxation, just to kind of calm you down, so you can book a session with them. And again, it's nothing in this particular experience is correlated directly with their products, but the fact that they put this into their boutique shows that they're trying to draw people to the store to as part of like a lifestyle thing beyond just selling them products.
It's actually funny because when we think about that evolution of retail, Shiseido, when they started, part of their history is actually that they were a ice cream cafe in Ginza. So they started with a very narrow range of products, but complemented that by having a cafe ice cream parlor in the store. And that was they're a 150-year-old company now. So 150 years ago, companies like Shiseido were already doing that, right? And it's interesting how we see these cycles come back of this kind of separation out, and then a reconversion of creating a little bit more of an experience other than just a single go-to. And again, we have there the example we talked about Aesop. So what those stores look at, the experience you get in those stores. And the one on the bottom left, this is a very good example, right, of experience retail. So this is I think the photo is the Glossier store, Glossier out of New York, right? Primarily was launched as an online only beauty brand. Again, a lot of influencer focus when the brand launched. They opened a store in New York, down in Soho, that was ultimately built for that Instagrammable experience more than actually selling product, right? And a beautiful store, absolutely fantastic store, very little product lying around. And actually, if you wanted to buy something, you had to find a sales associate, and they would essentially give you an iPad. And then on the iPad, you would actually, you'd look at the physical product and say, yeah, I'll have one of those, one of those, one of those. You then do the checkout on the iPad, and then wait at the exit, and essentially then above the store they had a warehouse that they would pick it, put it into the bag, and then it would drop down a chute, and they'd announce your name, Rob, come pick up your product, and you go over. But it created an amazing experience, and the store was packed, and a queue, hundreds of meters down the road. But unfortunately, they seem to have lost their way a bit. I think they've opened some other stores, but I know the Soho store closed down. But a really good example in the beauty industry of a leading kind of experience-focused store concept behind to drive the brand, and very successful for a long time. You were talking about the diptyque experience, right?
Yeah, diptyque, they offer complimentary gift wrapping, which a lot of brands do that, but their gift wrapping is quite elaborate, and you get to watch them obviously gift wrap your products, and I would say it's sort of semi-ceremonial, because you can choose different layers of colors, and it's just a very elevated personal touch that I quite like about shopping in diptyque. If I think that I have to buy a present for somebody, I always say diptyque candle. Go there, they wrap it for you. It looks great, and then you just hand it off.
They're really good products as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. That helps.
But I mean, it's a very simple example of an experience that you can create create, right? Something that makes you go to there rather than going somewhere else to buy a candle, right? But you're going because, like you say, if it's a gift, it's a great thing to give to somebody, but you're going for that experience is what you're going for, right? Okay, so what's next? What's next? We all know what's next, right? Yes.
What about the metaverse?
What about the metaverse? Beauty in the metaverse. Okay. I think we talked a little bit about this last year, about we kind of launched ourselves, so obviously as a company ourselves, we supply products into the beauty industry. Supplying online in the metaverse, makes sense. That's where our clients are going. They're already selling products in the metaverse. They see it as a huge opportunity. But we were saying yesterday, okay, how do you do fragrance in the metaverse? I mean, the metaverse is a very visual experience. The beauty industry itself is extremely tactile and obviously fragrance based. And actually, the biggest component of beauty is actually fragrance focused. So how do you create that experience in the metaverse? Well, actually, we'd also kind of looked into this a while back, but there is already a university out there that has a patent for a device that you would insert into your nose. That would simulate the smells from anything, right? Because if you think about it, in reality, the fragrance and the smells is simply it's a neural reaction, right? So if you can stimulate that same reaction in the nerves in your nose, in theory you can fool the brain, if you like, into thinking that it can smell something specific, right? And there's a university out there that have the patent on that device already. So can you do fragrance in the metaverse? Technically, absolutely you could. Is that something that suddenly is going to get added to the Oculus headsets? And something you see.
We're going to look quite silly in a few years. All this stuff sticking up our nose.
But we're walking around with big headsets on, etc. But it's an interesting conversation, right? And you say, look, you could do fragrance if you wanted to do fragrance, you could do it. And I think we definitely see on that, a lot of our customers coming to us on that packaging side of it, wanting to give unique versions of the packaging to customers in the metaverse. So they buy the real one and they say, oh, you can have an NFT, you can pick which one you want, and you can use that in your offline world. Again, because I think with fragrance particularly, everybody's got, the fragrance isn't stuck in your cupboard, right? Your fragrance is out on your top, and you look at it very much as a piece of interior, decorative to your bedroom or your bathroom, etc. So you think that works in the metaverse, as opposed to other things. But the metaverse is there. I mean, beauty brands are already in. We're already doing it. Estee Lauder putting a lot of focus onto it. I think we're also looking. So we know Dior created an avatar, for their beauty lines. A lot of brands doing, obviously, color cosmetics is much easier to do, right?
Sure.
As well as the physical products, etc.
I think L'Oreal just signed something with Meta to build a sort of metaverse ecosystem or incubator.
And I think again, interesting. We talk a lot about in the beauty industry that actually the distribution models are essentially through distributors and wholesalers before they get to the consumer. So the brands, it's very difficult for them to connect directly to those consumers.
Right.
And a lot of the work that we do actually tries to bridge that gap, right, with the technology that we introduce into those stores. But actually, the metaverse gives them a very easy bridge to do that, right? It's ultimately you can create a one-to-one experience for the consumer that feels very, oh, this is personalized to me. This is how the brand's working with me, etc. And obviously on the brand side, that you're creating a lot of information, a lot of data about the consumer in that interaction. We just see every single beauty company, if you look, has done something in the metaverse already. Within the last 12 months, right? Every single brand is done it or doing it, but they're all trying to also bridge that into the physical world. Yeah. So they usually are doing it around some kind of a marketing activity. So we see less around the store investment and maybe the standalone stores, but we generally seem to see a lot of pop-up stores that are very marketing focused, that have a lot of technology in them, that then bridge into also into the metaverse and into NFTs, right? I mean, the fashion business kind of really took the lead on that probably 2-3 years ago, and we're seeing beauty companies kind of doing the same thing, trying to bridge their online offline through the metaverse. And there's some fantastic examples out there of what some of the brands have done. Very, very different experiences. And remember the Chanel one, right? I mean, the Chanel arcade was pre-COVID, yeah?
It was pre-COVID. I remember when I was in Hong Kong, they had a pop-up in Hong Kong, and it was very popular.
And it was absolutely packed, right? You were queues to get in. Luckily, we knew some people at Chanel and managed to get in, but it was a good experience, So the actual concept itself of building a digital arcade, where with all the classic games, but branded from a Chanel perspective, but then obviously using QR codes to capture information, bridge the, and there were special products, right, that you could get that were not available anywhere else. And this, I think they went all over Asia with it, right, with this experience, and it was a very well done experience. And I think going back to that marketing launch, pop up, online, metaverse, the more things that you're doing and the more channels that you're actually pushing, at that same time, there's definitely a significant uplift, right? I think it's like we were saying there, if you're across 3 channels or more, it's like 200-300% incremental, as opposed to just doing one thing one way, right? Yeah.
So we have a couple of questions on Zoom. And I forgot to lead off with this, so if anybody has any questions, you can type them into Zoom, and we can see them and answer them. The first question is, what advice can you give to online startups who would want to move into brick and mortar outlets?
Ooh, interesting that online startup thinking about brick and mortar.
Yeah.
Right. Where 2-3 years ago, that I'm going online. I don't need brick and mortar. But I think everybody now realizes actually brick and mortar plays a critical role in the development of any brand. And we also, let's not get away from the fact, despite everything that happened in COVID, 70% of retail sales still happen in a physical store.
Yes.
Right. Online didn't even get over 30%, and it was low 20s pre-COVID. Obviously, country by country, it's a little different,
sure,
right? Different levels of maturity, of course. But advice, I think it would be. I think it depends on the product, but I think going into the smaller niche retailers, the US is a good example. Going into Ulta, they have an area set aside specifically for that, where they want startups and indies to come and put stuff on the shelves. I think that those more kind of, I would say, niche retailers probably are more open to that. But there's also a lot of I think we were talking yesterday, Dover Street Market, right? It's a very interesting retail concept. It's a bit of a we're never quite sure what's in there, but they have their beauty products in there from time to time. So I would say, if you're going to start and you want to get into brick and mortar, find those niche retail locations, brick and mortar locations in market, and get in and out of that. But when you do it, you have to tie it into the offline, into social as well. As we said, that's how you maximize that brick and mortar opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think doing a brick and mortar like a multi-brand retailer would be the obvious lowest barrier to entry to offline, requires the least amount of investment. And if you were to do something like that, I think having something on the product that allows the consumer to still connect with you online, because if you don't have your own retail store, it makes it a little bit more difficult to connect directly with your customer. So, if you had a QR code on the packaging, or even brands now, they're putting NFC tags in the product packaging, it creates a mechanism for brands to connect with their consumers regardless of the channel that the product is sold in. And then you can, so if your consumer buys your product offline, that QR code can then bring them back online again, and you can kind of have this continuous loop of engagement with the consumer.
And the funny thing is, these are not new technologies.
No.
And if we think back to pre-COVID, that we were pushing these technologies with a lot of our customers, but there was little interest. Post-COVID, now everybody
knows what a QR
everybody knows what a QR code. They all want it on the packaging. They want RFID or NFC embedded into the packaging to create that experience. It's interesting to think that sometimes you need a global pandemic to create a little bit of a catalyst.
Yeah, that's right. Another question: brands are also creating experiences online, like TikTok challenges, right? Those are quite popular. Augmented reality interactions. So this is what the current sort of Gen Z now?
Gen Z, why?
Lost track. The current generation is used to. So why do we still need physical retail spaces if they've got all this online engagement? And the younger generation is all online all the time.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of a generational thing as well. Yeah, I think the generation today coming in through their teens are all online. Everything's online. And actually we actually now see a little bit of that bottom end of it. Actually, the kind of the early teens actually now turning off a lot on that side. They actually don't want to be sharing everything and posting all the time. We're seeing a little bit of a slowdown on that, and I think we're seeing that with some of the news that we see around traffic on Instagram and Facebook and other social channels, right? It's becoming a lot more of a one-to-one communication rather than a kind of just booming it out everywhere. We use our UK collection brand heavily pushes on TikTok. That's their a large portion of the consumers are trying to engage with are on that channel, and therefore they put a lot of focus in driving activity through TikTok. But it's not the same in every single country, right? Every market is different. Every what's popular in one country doesn't work in another. China's always a really good example of that. It's so different and so fast. But if you're in that offline world all the time, it's a good question, right? Do you even need brick and mortar? You can get everything online if you want to.
Yeah, of course you can. I don't personally. I don't think it's a binary choice. I think the two need to coexist. And I always think about, like, let's say a Chanel handbag. And obviously this depends on the price point of your products. Are you selling high-end cosmetics and skincare, or are you selling, sort of mass market? So there's a difference, obviously. But if you were to buy a Chanel handbag, would you rather buy it online, or would you rather buy it in a Chanel store? I think most people, they'd want to buy it in the store.
But it also depends on the experience you get when you go on in the store.
Well, that's
right?
The whole point. Is you want to feel pampered. You want that experience of buying something in a Chanel store, because for most people, very rarely do they buy a Chanel handbag, and so that gives them a reason to go into the store.
Part of that is that good feeling you get, right?
Right.
That kind of release of endorphin.
Exactly.
You're excited about somebody's looking after you, and you're getting good glasses of champagne because you're just about to spend 3 months worth of salary on a bag, right?
Right. So if you're a beauty brand and you're not offering that kind of elevated experience or any kind of engaging experience, then of course you would just buy it online. You would have no reason to go into the store.
Well, also you're ignoring a large portion of the population as well, right?
Who don't shop online.
Who don't shop online, or who don't look at the experience in that same way.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that the kind of Gen Zs are coming up through are more interested about that experience online than physical retail. Yeah, means that what's happening now and what we're talking about will change. Of course, it will change.
Yeah,
and it will change to be more. Maybe it becomes less brick and mortar, less physical stores. It's more online. But then there's already a wave of people coming behind who are not interested in that, right? So it then it could quite easily flip back, right? I mean, we literally just went to a watch store,
MB&F.
MB&F watch store here in Raffles, and you couldn't buy anything, right? It was purely a display. It's an exhibition. They're showing a lot of the unique pieces that they have, but it was interesting. They said, sorry, we don't sell that, but it was a great experience.
Right.
It was really good fun. Yes. And again, so then you go online and you start to look at the product and share it. So yeah, you're absolutely right that it may not be relevant for specific generations, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to become relevant for them in the future.
Right.
And even if there's a phase where it kind of tails off again, we definitely see these cycles. As I say, Shiseido 150 years ago opened a store that was part beauty salon, part ice cream parlor. They still have that store today.
They do.
They've had the Shiseido parlor in Ginza, has been there for the same space all that time. Yeah. So these trends come around.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.